What you're about to hear is a first-person confession, inspired by the real story, or perhaps the legend, of the Anechoic Chamber at Orfield Labs. They built it to study silence, the pure kind, untouched by echo, immune to sound. I wasn't a scientist, just a volunteer with something to prove. They told me no one lasts more than 45 minutes, that most beg to leave, that others hear things that aren't real. I laughed. They told me to sit, breathe, and listen. That's all. Just listen. But silence doesn't sit still. It creeps. It expands. It stares. Inside that room, stripped of every outside noise, I found something waiting. Not outside me. Inside. Something I didn't know could speak. Something that had been waiting for a quiet place to whisper back. And when the door finally opened again, I wasn't sure who walked out. It was thicker than I imagined. The door. I remember how it moved, slow and deliberate, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When it sealed shut behind me, it didn't click or clang or thud. It was softer than that. A hush, as if the room had swallowed the sound before it could be born. They told me it was the quietest place on Earth, a space designed to absorb 99% of sound. Wedge-shaped foam panels lined every surface, floor, walls, ceiling, all pointing inward like a room made of open mouths. I stood in the center and waited for the silence to hit. It didn't come all at once. It crept. At first, it was just the absence of noise. No hum from the air conditioning, no distant cars, no fluorescent buzz. My shoes didn't echo. When I exhaled, the sound disappeared the moment it left my lips. I took a step. The sole of my boot touched the mesh floor, suspended above the foam beneath it. No sound, just the sensation of pressure. My own weight felt strange, disconnected from the space. I told myself I was fine. For a while, I was. I sat down in the chair in the middle of the chamber, a simple metal frame, anchored so it wouldn't scrape or squeak. They said I'd be alone for as long as I could handle it. There was no timer, no intercom, just a camera hidden somewhere I couldn't see, tracking how long it would take for me to ask out. The silence began to shift. I heard a soft thump. At first I thought it came from outside, but there was no outside anymore. It came again, steady, rhythmic. It was my heartbeat. It wasn't that I could hear it, I could feel it too. Not just in my chest, but in my throat, my ears, the soles of my feet. It pulsed like a drum beneath my skin. Then came the clicks, tiny ones, in my neck, my wrists, my spine. Every adjustment I made to stay comfortable sent sharp, dry cracks echoing through my bones. My eyelids made sound when they moved, so did my tongue. I shifted in the chair, trying to distract myself. The movement of muscle against muscle was audible, not loud, but inescapable. My breathing became a steady presence, a hiss and drag I couldn't turn off. I tried to slow it, make it disappear, but that only made me more aware of it. I wasn't just breathing air. I was breathing inside the silence. A sudden twitch in my thigh, just a muscle spasm. Felt like someone had slapped the inside of my leg. My stomach gurgled once, and the wet squelch of it echoed inside my skull. The room was supposed to be still, controlled, but I began to feel pressure, like the silence was weight pressing inward from all sides. I could feel it on my skin, in my throat, behind my eyes. My body tried to compensate. My ears strained for something, anything. I thought I heard a faint whine, high-pitched, steady, but it vanished as soon as I noticed it. Or maybe it had never been there. I blinked. That made a sound too. The realization struck me then. I wasn't just in the quiet. I had become the noise. Every internal function was magnified. My body was no longer private. The silence had stripped away the buffer between inside and out. I could hear myself being alive, and it was too much. I pressed my palms together and held still. No more shifting, no more blinking, just breathing, but even that betrayed me. The silence had turned on me, and somewhere behind the throb in my head and the clicks in my bones, I felt something else start to stir. Something quieter than thought. Something listening. The first sound came like an accident, distant, low, barely there. A tap. Not from within me, I was sure of that. It echoed slightly as if bouncing off something inside the walls. I froze, waiting for it to repeat. It didn't. Not immediately. I told myself it was just my mind reaching. The silence made the brain hungry. It would grasp for anything. They warned me about that back in the briefing room. You may begin to hear things, one of them said. It's just your sensory system recalibrating. But this didn't feel like recalibration. It felt deliberate. The second sound was softer but closer. A shuffle, like a foot dragging on padded floor. I snapped my head to the left. Nothing. The room didn't change. The foam walls absorbed the movement as easily as it absorbed sound. No shadows moved. The light remained dim and cold. I stayed seated, but every part of me went rigid. My ears strained, not just outward but inward, like I could somehow reverse them, make them listen more deeply than they were built to. Another knock, this time behind me. 3 taps, spaced apart like code. I spun around in the chair, half expecting to see someone, something, standing there. But the room was empty. It was always empty. Still, my breath caught. I began scanning the seams of the walls, the ceiling, the space beneath the mesh floor. I couldn't see the camera. But what if it wasn't a camera? What if the room itself was recording me, watching me through frequencies I couldn't understand? The silence had become an invitation, an open page for my mind to write on. I didn't like what it was writing. That's when I heard the breathing, not mine. Mine was shallow, panicked. This one was slower, calm, rhythmic. It came from my left, just past the edge of the foam wall. I turned my head slowly. The sound stopped. I turned back. It returned. It matched the rise and fall of something with lungs. But it wasn't me. I stood. My own movement sounded enormous now. A rustle of clothing, a creak in my knee, the brush of my hand against the metal chair. But none of that compared to the way the other breathing vanished the moment I moved. It was like it knew. I approached the wall and placed my hand against the foam. It was soft, like skin left out in the sun too long, warm, almost pulsing. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. Then a whisper. Not a word, just a breath, sharp and sudden, as if something had been waiting for me to come closer. I stumbled back, heart pounding in my throat. That's when the footsteps began. Soft, slow, spaced apart, one after the other, circling the perimeter of the chamber. I couldn't see them, but I heard them, muffled by the foam, dragging across the mesh. They moved like a person testing the limits of a room. I closed my eyes, trying to shut it out, but that only made the other sounds louder. A creak above, like weight shifting overhead. A pop in the corner, like fingers snapping once in warning. The sound of a throat clearing behind my right shoulder. I didn't turn. I couldn't. I wasn't sure what I'd see if I did. I began pacing, small steps across the mesh floor. My footfalls disappeared into the nothingness beneath me. The echoes in my head didn't. The other sounds continued, just slightly out of rhythm with mine, like someone mimicking me with a half-second delay. I whispered to myself, not words, just noise. A test. Something to confirm I was still the one making sound. But when I stopped, the other steps didn't. They kept going. And somewhere deep inside the foam, something exhaled. I sat back down because standing felt exposed. My knees shook and I didn't trust the floor. The mesh beneath my feet had started to feel fragile, like it would give way if I shifted wrong. I rested my elbows on my thighs, tried to calm my breath. But there it was again, that sound, my pulse. It wasn't a heartbeat anymore. It was a full-body presence, something that bloomed behind my ears and pressed outward like a drumbeat underwater. It filled the hollow of my skull. Every thud came with a tremor of pressure in my jaw, my neck, the backs of my eyes. It didn't feel like it was pushing blood. It felt like it was making something grow. The silence didn't just surround me anymore. It felt like it was inside me, not empty, but dense, liquid, moving. I could hear the fluid shift in my ears every time I tilted my head. I could hear the small muscles in my neck stretch and contract with each breath. I clenched my jaw, and the grinding of bone felt like sandpaper dragging across metal. I tried holding my breath, just to see what would happen. The silence rushed in, not peaceful, but violent, like air sucked from a room. My body screamed back with sound, the creak of my spine, the pop in my shoulder, the gurgle of something deep in my gut. I exhaled too quickly and felt dizzy. The room wasn't amplifying sound, it was dissecting it. No, dissecting me. It was as if every layer of my being was being peeled back and translated into noise. But not for me, for someone else, for something else. Something that was listening, cataloging, analyzing. Something that fed off the rhythm of my body losing its center. I became hyper-aware of my tongue. It felt too big in my mouth. I could hear the saliva shift when I swallowed, thick and wet, like a leech turning over in water. I tried to stay still, to stop the chain reaction, but there was always something. A tendon twitch, a vertebra clicking into place, a vein expanding with pressure. Then I heard the laughter. Low, slow, almost silent, but not mine. It vibrated along my spine like a voice humming through bone. It didn't sound human, not quite. It sounded like the idea of a laugh, filtered through something that had never used lungs. I pressed my fingers to my temples, hard, trying to block out the pressure. But I could feel it under my skin, not a noise, but a crawling, like something was moving between my skull and the silence, tracing the shape of my thoughts. The thought came uninvited. What if it's not that the silence is inside me, but that I am now inside something else? The walls no longer felt like walls. They felt like membranes, like I was in the belly of something vast and indifferent. I imagined that the foam wasn't absorbing sound, but digesting it. And I was next. My blood thundered louder, syncing with something I couldn't name, a rhythm that wasn't mine. I began to feel split, like part of me was still sitting in the chair, and the other part had been pulled just beneath the skin, pressed like a face against glass from the inside, watching, listening, waiting. I opened my mouth to speak, but the air inside it had weight, and when I tried to form words, they hit something soft and invisible, like trying to shout underwater. All that came out was a tremble. A part of me wondered if I was even real anymore, because the sound inside me wasn't just a heartbeat now, it was breathing, and I couldn't tell if it was mine. It became clear when I stopped trying to make sense of the noises. I let them happen, the internal grind, the pulse thuds, the twitch cracks, and waited to see if they'd pass. But they didn't. They rearranged. They began to form patterns, not rhythmic, not musical, something closer to speech, but not in any language I knew. I sat frozen, every nerve tuned like a wire, and realized the room wasn't just absorbing what I gave it, it was responding. Not in echoes or reverberations, but in silence that seemed to bend around thought. Every time I thought about leaving, the air thickened. When I thought about someone outside, the technician, the observer, anyone, a pressure built behind my eyes like a warning. And when I thought about it, whatever it was that had started breathing inside me, the pressure vanished, like relief. The room was aware, not just of sound, but of attention, of intention. It didn't want to be escaped or solved. It wanted to be known. At first, it was subtle. A shift in temperature when I recalled a childhood memory. A weight on my shoulders when I imagined light behind the door. But the more I noticed it, the more certain I became that I was not alone, not physically but cognitively. The chamber had crossed into me. The silence began to vibrate with impressions, ideas delivered without tone or voice, as if beamed straight into the core of me. It didn't speak in sentences, it spoke in understandings. You've brought too much noise with you. Sit still long enough and you'll hear your true shape. Everything unnecessary will fall away. You will hear only what remains. I didn't hallucinate these. They didn't come like dreams or voices or madness. They came like gravity, immediate, unarguable. It was as if the absence of noise created space for something deeper to communicate, a primal signal that could only exist when the layers of life's clutter had been stripped away. I was no longer in a room that rejected sound. I was in a mind that had no need for it, and it was thinking back. I stood slowly, testing if movement still obeyed me. The air resisted, not physically but perceptually, like I was walking through memory, not space. The foam walls no longer looked like wedges. They looked like petals or teeth, breathing, waiting. I placed my hand against the wall again, not warm this time, cold, steady, like the side of a stone that had watched centuries pass. I felt the silence pulse against my skin, not a vibration, but a resonance. Like the room was reading me through contact, like it already knew what I would feel before I did. Then came the image. It wasn't a vision, not quite, more like a realization in picture form. A room identical to this one, but with someone else sitting in the chair. Not me, a woman. Her eyes open, her mouth moving, but no sound came out. She wasn't panicking. She was listening to something deep and low and vast, and I understood. She had been here before me, maybe days ago, maybe years, maybe always. The room was showing me its memory, or maybe it was mine. I blinked, and the image was gone, but the impression remained, stamped behind my eyes like a second set of thoughts. I began to wonder if the silence had removed something from me, or added something in. I returned to the chair, slowly, carefully, as if it now belonged to something else. My body moved on instinct. No commands, no will. I sat, and for the first time I stopped hearing my own breath, because something else had taken it. I didn't mean to speak. It just slipped out, a whisper first, soft and broken. "Hello?" It sounded right in my throat, in the muscles around my mouth. I formed the word. I felt the breath pass through it. But there was nothing afterward. No trace, no rebound. It was as if I'd exhaled into a black hole. I tried again, louder this time. "Is anyone there?" Silence, absolute and consuming, pressed in tighter than before. Not just a lack of reply, a void, as though the sound had been erased at the molecular level. I couldn't even hear my own voice from inside my head. The air swallowed everything before it had shape. I stood up so fast the chair skidded slightly, that tiny sound. Even it felt fake. I shouted, panic rising like acid. "Let me out!" Still nothing. Not a whisper, not a tremble. My vocal cords strained, my chest heaved, but there was no sound. Not even the proof of my existence. I screamed again, longer, harder, until my throat burned raw. But the result was the same. Nothing. That's when the fear shifted. It stopped being about the room. It became about me. What if I wasn't making sound anymore? What if something had severed that part of me without warning? What if the connection between action and effect had broken? The way my voice moved through the world, gone. I clutched at my chest, needing something solid. My heartbeat was still there, hammering away. I could feel it, but could I hear it? Had it stopped too? I dropped to my knees, pressed my head to the mesh floor. I opened my mouth again, slow this time, intentional. "My name is..." but I couldn't finish. Not because I forgot the rest, but because in that moment I wasn't sure the name meant anything. It felt foreign. A noise once assigned to me by others, something said out loud to prove you're real. But if no one can hear it, am I? I reached up, dragging my fingers along the foam wall. It gave slightly, just enough to make the illusion of movement. My fingernails scraped softly. Or maybe they didn't. I felt the texture. I saw the friction, but I couldn't hear it. The chamber had taken sound, but not just mine. It had taken reaction, proof, consequence. Everything I did now existed in isolation, action without echo, movement without memory. I backed away from the wall, shivering. My skin felt disconnected. My thoughts didn't come in words anymore. They came in pulses, broken flashes of feeling. Faces of people I'd known flickered and faded. Voices I once heard now had no sound. I mouthed, "Mom," and nothing came with it. Just the gesture. Empty. Something brushed past my shoulder. I froze. There was no wind, no movement in the air. But I felt it, like static, like breath. I turned my head sharply, expecting to see someone, anyone, but there was no one. Only space, only the growing suspicion that I hadn't been alone in hours, or that I was alone, in a way no human was meant to be. Because somewhere along the spiral, something had stopped watching me and started occupying me. Thoughts that weren't mine began surfacing, ideas too large, too alien, too cold, like the memory of a machine, like silence that had lived too long and finally found a vessel. I clutched at my temples. I tried to say no, but again, no sound. My mouth moved in protest, in horror, in pleading, and the silence replied with nothing at all. No resistance, no acknowledgement, just the understanding that I had passed beyond the point of being heard. And I was starting to wonder if I had ever been here at all. I don't remember sitting back down. I don't remember closing my eyes. I just remember opening them to find that the light had shifted. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe time had. The air felt thicker, colder, as if hours had passed without my permission. My arms were crossed tightly over my chest. My fingertips were numb. I tried to trace the last thing I'd done, the last thought I'd had, but it all blurred, like pages soaked through and melted together. No sequence, no beginning or end, only moments. And the moments weren't mine anymore. I began hearing things, not like before. These weren't footsteps or breath or echoes. These were memories, but not remembered. Inserted, they didn't unfold with images or sound. They dropped, fully formed into my awareness. A woman's voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. Not my mother, someone else. She whispered something I knew had never been spoken aloud. Not to me, not by me. Still, I heard it. Not with my ears, but inside the hollow space where language normally lives. I saw the hallway of my childhood home. Not the one that exists in photos, but the one from the nightmares I never told anyone about. The crack in the wall near the bathroom. The shadow that never moved, no matter what time of day it was. I felt the cold floor against my bare feet. I smelled bleach and damp carpet. I tried to tell myself it was my brain misfiring, filling the void with fragments. But the memories weren't just vivid, they were precise. And some of them didn't belong to me. A hand I didn't recognize, a room I'd never entered, a scream muffled behind a wall I never built. They poured in slowly, deliberately, like the silence was feeding them to me, revealing them, not like dreams, like excavations. I whispered, or thought I whispered, "What are you?" The answer came not in words, but in knowing. This is not silence. This is what silence reveals. It wasn't absence I was sitting in, it was presence, heavy, ancient, buried beneath every noise I'd ever known. The quiet wasn't emptiness, it was density. It was layered, thick with the weight of 1,000 unheard moments, tragedies that had no witness, screams that had nowhere to go, confessions smothered before they were spoken. They hung in the stillness like dust in untouched air. The chamber had collected them, preserved them, or worse, invited them, and now it was unfolding them in me. I tried to stand, but my legs felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I pressed my palms into my thighs and grounded myself in sensation, the warmth of skin, the tension of muscle. Then I felt something pulse beneath my hand, not my leg, something under it. I leapt to my feet and nearly tripped. The room didn't shift. The chair didn't move. But I did, suddenly and without cause, convinced that whatever I'd felt had not been part of me. I circled the space, trying to remember where the door had been. There was no visible seam, no sign of entry or exit. Just wall after wall after wall. The foam felt softer now, wetter, as if it had begun to breathe. I pressed my forehead against it and felt a sensation rush through me, like static and memory and grief all at once. A flood of soundless noise filled my chest, not painful, intimate. The silence was inside me now. It knew my patterns, it had learned my language, and it was speaking back in emotion. "You brought too much of yourself here," it said, "and now we are helping you leave it behind." I closed my eyes, and in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw something open its own. They said I left the room. I remember light, voices, movement, the sound of sound, applause even. I think someone clapped when I stepped out. I think someone asked if I was okay. I nodded, smiled, even spoke, but I never really heard my own words. Not since then, because the silence didn't stay behind. It followed. It nested somewhere deep, between the things I say and the things I mean, between the sound of my laugh and the echo of something watching me laugh. It's there, always, in between, waiting. People talk to me now and I see their mouths move, but sometimes I forget to listen. Not because I don't care, but because I'm still trying to hear if it's breathing. And if you ever find yourself in a place that quiet, where even your thoughts feel loud, don't stay. Because if you hear that silence, it already heard you first.